You wake up after sleep and feel the same heaviness, not physical exhaustion, something duller, deeper. Your body rested, your mind didn't recover, and you've probably told yourself it's stress, screens, work, age. But those explanations never fully land. Because part of you already knows this tiredness doesn't come from effort. It comes from something quietly draining you while you're awake and following you into rest. This video isn't about productivity, health, or motivation. It's about why rest fails when the mind never powers down, why modern exhaustion survives sleep, why doing nothing still feels costly. If you've felt this for years without language for it, that's not an accident. This explanation has layers. Each part depends on the last. Skipping will feel easier, but it will break understanding. Most people misunderstand tiredness because they misunderstand behavior. They look at actions, schedules, workloads, and visible stressors. They assume exhaustion is proportional to effort. Work more, get tired, rest more, recover. But human behavior doesn't work that cleanly. What drains you most isn't what you do, it's what you perform. Modern life runs on performance, not function. You don't simply act, you present. You don't speak, you calibrate. You don't rest, you manage appearances of rest. This constant adjustment creates a surface illusion that tiredness comes from activity, when in reality it comes from sustained self-monitoring. And self-monitoring never sleeps. People believe they are tired because they're busy, but busyness is often a mask, not a cause. Beneath it sits something more corrosive, the effort of maintaining a socially acceptable version of yourself. The polite tone you keep even when irritated, the interest you fake, the emotions you suppress because they don't fit the setting. This is not effort you can recover from by lying down. The surface illusion convinces you that exhaustion is external, work, noise, responsibility. But those are manageable. What isn't manageable is the silent labor of self-editing, of constantly checking whether your reactions are appropriate, of filtering your thoughts before they reach your face, of being alert not to danger, but to judgment. Social life trains you to believe morality is about kindness, patience, positivity. But much of that morality is performative. It rewards emotional restraint, not emotional truth. You are taught to regulate not for health, but for palatability. Over time, this creates a split, the inner experience and the outer display. Maintaining that split is mentally expensive, and the bill arrives as fatigue. This is why some people feel most tired after social interaction, not physical labor, because conversation isn't just exchange, it's calculation. What can I say? What should I hide? How will this land? Even silence becomes active. You're not resting, you're standing guard over your image. The illusion deepens when society praises this state, being composed, being easy to work with, being emotionally intelligent. These labels sound virtuous, but often they describe someone who has learned to suppress internal signals for external harmony. That suppression doesn't disappear, it accumulates. People misread calmness as peace. They misread politeness as alignment. They misread stability as health. In reality, many calm people are exhausted because calm is not their natural state, it's enforced. A posture held too long becomes strain. An emotion swallowed too often becomes weight. This is why rest fails. Sleep restores the body, but it doesn't undo a day spent denying internal impulses. You wake up with muscles relaxed, but vigilance intact. The system that watches, edits, and restrains never powered down. The surface illusion also teaches you to misread others. You assume confident people are energized, that agreeable people are fine, that quiet people are calm. You don't see the cost behind those traits. You don't see the internal negotiations happening beneath a smooth exterior. Everyone is tired, but for different hidden reasons. False morality plays a role here. You're taught that discomfort is weakness, that irritation is immaturity, that boredom means something is wrong with you. So instead of responding honestly to internal states, you override them. You stay engaged when disengagement would be honest. You stay polite when distance would be accurate. Over time, your nervous system learns one thing: your signals don't matter. That lesson alone is exhausting. The surface illusion protects the system. If people believed tiredness came from emotional dishonesty and constant self-suppression, they would question the rules. So tiredness is reframed as lifestyle failure. You didn't sleep enough. You didn't manage stress well. You didn't optimize. The blame stays personal, not structural. And because everyone else appears to be coping, you assume the problem is you. You push harder, you perform better, you rest less honestly, and the tiredness deepens. What you feel isn't laziness. It isn't weakness. It isn't age. It's the cost of living in a world that rewards controlled behavior over integrated behavior, where appearing functional matters more than being aligned, where the most draining work is invisible, constant, and mislabeled as normal. Until you see this illusion, you'll keep treating the symptom. More sleep, more breaks, more distractions, and you'll keep waking up tired, wondering why rest never works. Beneath the surface illusion sits a quieter system. This is where tiredness is generated, not noticed, not as a feeling, but as a background drain. The mind is not exhausted by thinking. It is exhausted by defending, and most defense happens unconsciously. The first hidden engine is fear, not dramatic fear, but low-grade, continuous threat detection. Your nervous system is constantly scanning for social risk, rejection, embarrassment, loss of status, misunderstanding. This vigilance doesn't announce itself. It feels like normal awareness, but it keeps the system slightly activated at all times. You are never fully off duty. Rest becomes shallow because the guard never leaves the post. The second engine is ego maintenance, not arrogance, identity, the image you believe you must uphold. Every time reality threatens that image, the mind intervenes. It reframes, it justifies, it suppresses contradiction. This costs energy, not once, but continuously. The more fragile the identity, the more energy it consumes. And because identity is social, it never stops being tested. The third engine is conditioning. From early on, you learned which emotions were acceptable and which were dangerous, which reactions earned connection and which earned withdrawal. That learning didn't disappear, it automated. Now, before you even feel something fully, it's filtered. That filter runs without consent. You don't notice it working. You only feel its cost as tiredness without cause. Another engine is unresolved vigilance. Past experiences taught your system that certain situations require control. So even when nothing is happening, part of you is braced. This isn't memory, it's posture. A readiness that no longer serves a current threat, but persists because the system was never shown it could stand down. Muscles can relax. Patterns take longer. There is also the drain of internal contradiction. Wanting one thing while doing another. Feeling one thing while expressing another. Knowing something but acting against it. The mind spends energy holding these contradictions apart so they don't collide. That separation work is constant, and it is invisible. Another truth is that rest threatens these systems. When you slow down, suppressed material floats up. Doubts, anger, emptiness. So the mind subtly resists rest. It seeks stimulation, noise, thought. Not because you want distraction, but because distraction keeps the deeper system from speaking. You mistake this resistance for restlessness. It's actually avoidance. Finally, there is survival logic. Humans evolved to prioritize belonging over comfort. Being liked mattered more than being rested. So the system still chooses exhaustion if it preserves connection. You stay alert, you stay available, you stay manageable. Even when alone, the pattern remains. The body sleeps, but the social brain keeps watch. None of these engines feel dramatic. They feel like just how life is. That's why they're effective. You don't question them. You don't name them. You just feel tired. And because the causes are unconscious, the solutions you reach for are mismatched. You treat fatigue as a physical problem, or a scheduling problem, or a motivation problem. But the drain isn't happening where you're looking. This tiredness is the cost of running outdated survival software in a world that never signals safety. A system optimized for constant adaptation, not recovery. And until that system is seen, not fixed, not improved, rest will remain incomplete. By the time you reach adulthood, the tiredness feels personal, like a flaw, like something you should have outgrown. But the deep core of this exhaustion doesn't begin in adulthood at all. It begins when the mind first learned that staying attuned to others was safer than staying attuned to itself. Early experiences don't wound by what happened. They wound by what had to be adapted. A child learns very quickly which parts of themselves disrupt connection. Curiosity that irritates, sadness that burdens, anger that threatens attachment. Those parts don't disappear. they go underground, and the energy required to keep them there becomes permanent background expenditure. This is where patterns form, not habits, patterns. The repetition of emotional strategies that once protected you. Hyper-awareness, compliance, withdrawal, overfunctioning, emotional neutrality. These are not personality traits. They are solutions that worked once, and the body keeps running them long after the problem has changed. Adult behavior looks autonomous, but it's often reenactment. You manage rooms the way you once managed caregivers. You anticipate reactions before they happen. You stay fine because being fine once preserved stability. None of this feels dramatic. It feels responsible, mature, normal. But it is tiring because it requires continuous prediction. People judge adults for being distant, irritable, passive, overly agreeable. But those behaviors are not choices made fresh each day. They are loops. The system doesn't ask, is this necessary now? It asks, did this keep me safe before? And if the answer is yes, it repeats. This is why tiredness persists even when life improves. The external conditions change faster than internal strategies. You are no longer under threat, but the body doesn't measure time that way. It measures pattern success. And success, in this context, means survival, not ease. As you grow older, these strategies solidify into identity. I'm just introverted. I'm just calm. I don't need much. But often, these identities are disguises for adaptations. The system prefers a stable story over a flexible truth. Changing would require uncertainty. Uncertainty once carried risk. So the mind chooses exhaustion over reorganization. The deep core is not about blaming parents or the past. It's about recognizing that the nervous system doesn't retire old roles on its own. It needs evidence. And most adults never provide that evidence because they keep replaying the same relational dynamics in new settings. Workplaces become families. Authority figures trigger old postures. Social groups recreate early hierarchies. You feel drained not because the present is overwhelming, but because it keeps activating a system built for earlier conditions. Every interaction becomes slightly heavier than it needs to be. This is also why judging others is tempting. It creates distance, but distance prevents recognition. When you see patterns instead of people, you start noticing something uncomfortable. Your exhaustion is not unique, and it's not random. It's structured, predictable, logical. The mind that learned to stay alert learned to survive, but survival mode is not meant to be lived in indefinitely. It narrows perception. It prioritizes control. It sacrifices recovery. Over years, this creates a sense of emptiness, not because nothing is happening, but because nothing is landing. Experiences pass through you without integration. Rest passes through without restoration. Sleep passes through without depth. Because the system is still oriented outward, still braced, still managing. Understanding this shifts something subtle, not relief, not healing, but clarity. You stop asking, what's wrong with me? And start seeing the machinery, the repetition, the loyalty to old solutions. And that clarity is uncomfortable, because it removes the fantasy that tiredness will disappear on its own. It won't. Not because you're broken, but because the system is doing exactly what it learned to do. Once you see that, judgment of yourself and others loses its grip. Not out of compassion, but out of precision. You see behavior as pattern, not character. Fatigue as cost, not weakness. And that recognition quietly prepares you for what comes next. Everything you've heard so far points to one conclusion: the mind resists. This tiredness is not a signal to slow down. It's a signal that you've been living in a way that requires constant self-control. The exhaustion isn't accidental, it's structural. The world doesn't exhaust you by force. It exhausts you by expectation, by requiring adaptation without resolution, by rewarding emotional management over emotional truth, by normalizing vigilance as maturity. Over time, this shapes people who function well and feel empty, who sleep deeply and wake depleted, who rest physically while remaining psychologically on call. This is why the title matters. You feel tired even after rest because rest was never the problem. The problem is that something in you never stands down, and the world quietly benefits from that. An alert person is predictable. A contained person is useful. A tired person questions less. The world will break you, not through trauma, but through repetition, unless you become ruthless, not cruel, not aggressive, ruthless in perception, ruthless in noticing where your energy leaks, ruthless in seeing when exhaustion is the price of belonging, stability, or identity. This isn't about fixing yourself. It's about no longer lying to yourself about why rest doesn't work. Once you see the machinery clearly, you can't unsee it, and that changes how you move through people, expectations, and silence. If something in this video felt uncomfortably accurate, don't rush to resolve it. Sit with it. Let the tiredness speak without correcting it. Awareness isn't relief, but it is the end of confusion.